I put it out there to a number of parents on social. What do you struggle with? A lot of them were saying how and when to talk about these difficult conversations in terms of sexuality and gender identity and things like that.
Let's start with when. And the answer to when is as soon as a kid is out of the womb. And I think, wait a minute, a 2-week-old, 2-year-old, like how does that happen? Well, by the way we talk with a child, by the way we relate to a child, by the way we appropriately touch a child, we are beginning a kind of sex education, you could say, so to speak. So one simple way is when we're younger, rather than saying to a kid, that's your ding dong or your wee wee, just say that's your penis, that's your vagina, and show comfort with the body that God has given us. And that shows a comfort between the parent and the child to talk about these kinds of issues. My son is 8 years old, and the topic of abortion came up. I have 3 older kids in our home, and it came up in the car. He goes, Dad, what's abortion? I'm thinking, okay, he's 8. How do I have this conversation? This is an opportunity, but tailor it in a way that makes sense to an 8-year-old, that I don't give more than he's asking and less. And I don't pretend to always get that right, but that's the goal. So I think we should look for opportunities from the earliest stages possible, just to affirm your being what it means to be a boy, what it means to be a girl, God's design for sex in age-appropriate ways. Now, there may be a time where you sit down and have the talk in more depth, but I think the best education about sex is just ongoing conversations that begin really as soon as we are relating to and talking with our kids. Now, how we do this, that is a huge question. So I guess I kind of answered both, but I would say as it relates to this book, let me focus there, because how you do it with an 8-year-old is different than a 12-year-old versus a 16-year-old. Mm-hmm. But one thing I did with this book is I'm just trying to come up with any ways possible to talk with my kids and engage them on issues of sexuality. So 2 examples. One, my daughter was 12, now she's 13. When I was finishing up the book, I said, hey, if you'd be willing to just read this whole thing, and then we go to coffee and you just tell me what you think, what you agree with, what was interesting to you. I'm not going to lecture her, but we talk about this. I'll buy you a pair of shoes. And she goes, Dad, there's an outlet. I can get 2 pair for 1. Will that work? I was like, fine. So she read it, and then we sat down for probably somewhere between an hour, hour and a half at the local coffee shop, and my 12-year-old daughter and I just talked about all the issues related to sexuality. On a separate how, my son, who was 14, now he's 16, he wanted to see this movie, Bohemian Rhapsody with Queen, a couple years ago. It's PG-13, so it had a little bit of suspect content in it, but I read it. I'm like, it's not too bad. He's 14. He asked me if he could go to it. I said, sure. And you can bring a friend, and I'll pay for you. I'll buy you popcorn. But one deal, when we're done, I just want to come back. We're sit down and talk about it. I want to know what you think. So I brought him, brought a friend. We came back. He let it sit down. He goes, all right, Dad, let's talk. I was like, okay. So probably 25, 30 minutes. I was like, hey, what'd you think about the movie? What did you enjoy? What was your favorite scene? I said, what do you think the message of the movie was? How do you think the message of this movie matched up with the biblical view? Did you ever feel the movie was preaching at you? And we just talked about the message in relationships. So again, when, as soon as possible, how, in conversations regularly and consistently in relationship with our kids.